Good evening. I'm Carolyn Washburn. I'm the editor of Cincinnati.com and the Enquirer, and I want to welcome you to tonight's candidate forum presented by the Anderson Unit of the League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area. The League is a nonpartisan political organization whose mission is to first encourage the informed and active participation of citizens in government, and second, to influence public policy through education and advocacy. I'd say that very much dovetails with the mission for the Enquirer and community press journalists. We want to give people the information they need to make an informed choice, and information that you need to be really engaged citizens. And we like to offer citizens opportunities just like this to get really direct access to people who make decisions for our communities. So I'm really glad to be part of this. And I'm glad all of you are here. I hope you'll read up on these candidates, answers to all of the questions that we asked them at our voter guide, which you can find at cincinnati.com/voter guide. You can create your own ballot by typing in your address and seeing all of the candidates on your ballot. So as we start, will you rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. It's worth noting that tonight's forum is for informational purposes only. It's not a formal debate. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates nor political parties. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items too. Exits are located outside the glass doors here, and restrooms are found on the opposite sides of the stairwell. And I'd like to remind you to turn off your electronic devices out of courtesy, but also because the FCC actually prohibits any or all unauthorized audio or video recording of debates and forums. So if you could silence your devices, that would be great. Thank you for attending, and to those of us who are watching on ACTV, we appreciate your engagement. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator. Glenda Bernstein is a League member, a volunteer moderator who lives in Mount Adams. Thank you, Glenda.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for braving the rainy weather to get out to our event tonight. I'm going to read the format of the evening's, the way the evening will proceed, so you'll know what's going to happen. To preserve a nonpartisan atmosphere during the forum, we have no campaign banners, signs, or handouts in the hall, including on the candidate's person. Candidates are identified, as you can see, by placards on the podiums in front of them. We do have campaign literature available on the table outside the room. I'll introduce each candidate for Ohio House of Representatives District 27. The candidates will give a 3-minute opening and a 3-minute closing statement. After the opening statements are completed, I will ask questions that cover areas relevant to the office. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question. Candidates are not required to use the entire time, and candidates may take a 30-second rebuttal if needed. We will have a question and answer with timed response format. However, I will ask the question only once, and candidates will respond when called upon. Each candidate will answer each question, and we will alternate who answers first. The first half of the forum is estimated to last approximately 45 minutes, followed by about 60 minutes of questions from the audience, closing statements, and final wrap-up. Any remaining time that's available may be used for informal conversation. So at this time, I introduce Republican candidate Tom Brinkman and Democrat candidate Joe Otis, and we will commence with the questions. We have opening statements, and Mr. Otis will go first.
Hi, first and foremost, I would like to thank the League, also Carolyn and Glenda, for hosting this, and everyone out in the audience who braved the storm and tornado watch that's out right now. My name is Joe Otis, and I am committed to being your voice at the state government. Growing up as the child of a single mother, the first lessons in life that I learned were perseverance, hard work, and determination. As JFK once said, ask not what your country, or ask not what you can do for your country, but Sorry, I apologize for that. Ask not what you can do for your country, or I apologize, I keep messing up this quote. JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. With that being said, my platform is very simple. A thorough and efficient public education system, a fair and honest tax code, and transparency and accountability in our state government. If we are able to accomplish this in Ohio's 131st GA, we will have then an efficient government, to my belief.
Okay, Mr. Brinkman, your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much. My name's Tom Brinkman. I'm a resident of Mount Lookout. I've served in the General Assembly for 4 terms from 2001 to 2008 and enjoyed that public service. And like Joe, public service has is a noble calling, and people get out in the arena and sometimes they get a little bloodied and battered, but it's important that we do discuss these issues, and for that reason I thank the League for putting this on. The next General Assembly has a lot of important issues to deal with. Some of them we'll discuss with the questions that will be asked later. But what's most important is that we do have representative government and that folks can feel that they can call their representative and they'll be accessible. I think for anyone who experienced my representation back in from 2001 2008 knows that I not only represent you, the constituents, the voters, the taxpayers, but I also work hard for the constituent groups in the district, the school districts, the park districts, the township, the little municipalities. Those constituent associations always come to the representative, and I've tried to give them a fair hearing and working for them up in Columbus also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those opening statements. We will proceed with question number 1. I will ask the question, and Mr. Otis will be the first to answer question number 1. Question 1. The state will end its last fiscal year with a projected surplus of over $800 million. What are your priorities for its best use after replenishing the rainy day funds? Mr. Otis, 3 minutes.
With this surplus that the state will have of $800 million, I think that the first thing that we as a state should do is invest in technical job training programs so that Ohioans right now can compete in our current technical job market. Also, I believe in returning money to our local governments, which would alleviate taxes at that point on the local level by reducing our taxes.
Okay. Mr. Brinkman?
Thank you. Well, there's a lot of different projections on how much this rainy day fund, or how much the surplus will be. What we need to remember is that the governor, without a vote of the General Assembly, put the state on the hook of buying into Obamacare. We have no idea how much that is going to cost the citizens in the state of Ohio. Right now, they're already at their suggested estimate of how much, and there's still people applying. So we have to see how much that's going to cost first. Second of all, we have to remember that this is perhaps a one-time thing that we have this surplus. We can't start making plans on how much we're going to spend down the road until we know if it's going to continue. I would like us to look at restoring some of the local government cuts. I think that they did balance a few of the budgets in the past on local governments, and that needs to see a little bit of relief. But I really think we have to see the full brunt of what this Medicaid expansion and Obamacare is going to mean to the citizens of the state of Ohio before we have any designs on how we're going to spend it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, do you have a response to that answer of that question?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll move on to question number 2. Does Ohio's current legislation regulating horizontal drilling, known as hydrofracking of shale gas, as well as disposal of drilling wastes, adequately protect Ohio's air, soil, and drinking water sources from possible toxic pollution? Why or why not? And question number 2, Mr. Brinkman will answer first.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad it's not around here. It's mostly in eastern Ohio because I don't think we really know. One thing it has done, it has certainly made the United States a top energy producer again. I think we're on track to be the largest energy producer in the world because of not only here in Ohio, but North Dakota and all these other areas where they're doing it. I think that there are some plans to check and be sure that it is environmentally friendly, and we have to be very, very careful about that. To segue a little bit, we are blessed to live in a nice area. The Little Miami River is something we need to keep protected. I've always stood pretty strong on environmental issues. I think 3 of the 4 General Assemblies I served in, I had the highest environmental record of a Republican up there because I really think we need to keep the environment in mind when we make some of these plans. But it's one of those things where I'm looking forward to getting up there and learning about, and we do certainly have to follow up with it.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, your response, please.
When it comes to fracking, as it stands right now, I am not comfortable with where the science is on this. In states such as New York, Pennsylvania, and Colorado, the toxins have already leaked into the groundwater, and there is evidence to prove that. So when it comes to hydrofracking, I think there should be more regulations put on hydrofracking because I am not comfortable with where the science lies on this right now.
Okay. All right. Mr. Brinkman, do you have a response or rebuttal of that?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. All right. All right. Moving on then to question 3. The Common Core standards were approved by 42 state education departments in a cooperative agreement years ago. Ohio school districts have already begun implementing and using them as guiding standards, including state assessments. Local school districts have some discretionary control over curriculum, but this is mainly controlled by Ohio's Department of Education. Do you plan to repeal the Common Core standards? If so, describe what standards you would propose to replace them with in the Ohio State Department of Education. Explain how this would gain greater local control of curriculum. Also, tell us how you would fund new assessments that would be needed. So question number 3, Mr. Otis, you answer first, please.
When it comes to Common Core, I am in agreement with Governor Kasich and with the Ohio Department of Education, as well as the Ohio School Board, on the implementation of these new teaching initiatives. With that being said, one of the major problems that comes with Common Core was not having the proper time or resources to implement it correctly. However, I am in agreement with the governor and with the state boards on the implementation of these teaching standards.
Okay. Mr. Brinkman, your response?
I hope it's repealed before I get there, but I will vote to repeal Common Core. In the beginning of your question, you mentioned that 42 state school boards have adopted it. No one in a representative democracy like we have has had a single vote on it. Congress didn't vote on it. The legislature has not voted on it. The school districts haven't been voted on it. This has been a top-down solution to a problem that, quite frankly, does not exist. I think that the citizens need to stand up like they have in Oklahoma, where they've totally repealed Common Core, join other states that never adopted it, and really become a leader in getting back to our education standard that we set here in Ohio. The bill that is in front of the legislature right now would adopt the Massachusetts standards. The Massachusetts standards are far superior to Common Core. Massachusetts has used these same standards to compete worldwide against Singapore, Malaysia, and other countries, and is right up there with them. And I feel that their adoption would be much better for the students in the state of Ohio. I don't see where that would cost any more money. You know, we're spending money to adopt the Common Core. Let's just shift and spend the money for the Massachusetts guidelines, and I think we'll be a lot more comfortable with those. Parents, teachers are outraged at this new learning that Common Core is being foisted on them. But what is even more outrageous is the fact that data is being collected on our children that will be in somebody's database for the rest of their lives. What was the scandal just this weekend where somebody tapped into JP Morgan's accounts. They tap into DSW. People can get into this information, their social security numbers, their health records, things like that. We should not be keeping this wealth of data on our children like Common Core has dictated. So just another reason why it's bad, and another reason why I will vote for its full repeal and work towards its full repeal if it isn't repealed by the time I get there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, do you have any response to that?
With the millions of dollars that have been spent on the implementation of Common Core already in our school districts, $1 million alone in Forest Hills, I believe it would be an egregious misuse of taxpayer funds to repeal Common Core at this point.
Okay.
And also, to add to that, if I may, if the legislature is to pass a repeal of Common Core, who is to say that a governor who is in favor of the Common Core will not veto these standards for the repeal?
Okay. And Mr. Brinkman, do you have a reply to that reply?
Well, again, certainly I'd just like to have a vote. Again, we'd be one of the first states to do that because, again, it's been a top-down driven thing, and I don't think that's right. I'd love to get the legislature involved, and again, hopefully they voted. And if the governor, which is my own party, votes wrong, I was part of a coalition of Republicans and Democrats that overrode Governor Taft when he vetoed something that we thought should pass. So I'm not opposed to standing up for the governor, and I think we have to sometimes.
Okay, thank you. All right, question 4. In your view, are there problems with transparency and full accountability in the use of taxpayer funds by Jobs Ohio? Why or why not? And for question number 4, Mr. Brinkman, you answer first, please.
Thank you. Back when I was in the General Assembly in 2008, I introduced, passed House Bill 420, which was Ohio's first Transparency and Accountability Act. It probably went about 40% of the way to really open up state governments so folks can really look in and see what's going on. I am troubled by Jobs Ohio because I don't know how many of you know, our Constitution is the 1851 Constitution. Why isn't it the 1803 when we first wrote one? Well, it's because state government got too cozy with the canal boat builders and operators, and it basically bankrupted the state. So they had to pass a new constitution, 1851, that really tried to make a separate wall between some of these corporate entities and the state government. That's why we're always voting on bond issues, whether it's Third Frontier, Ohio Clean Fund, those types of things, because we're not allowed to go above a certain limit because our Constitution for 1851 states that. That said, a little history lesson aside, I think we should know more what's going on with the economic development aspects of Jobs Ohio. It can't be just a closed thing. We should see where the money's going, how much is going there, and what the bang for the buck is. It does trouble me that it seems like with economic development, people are just outbidding each other, and are we really getting ahead? That's one of the things we need to see, and I will certainly look forward to follow up my work on House Bill 420 when I get to the legislature and continue to open up the transparency and accountability in the state of Ohio in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis?
Absolutely. I think there should be more transparency. I would like to, when I get to Columbus, work on bipartisan legislation to bring more transparency to all levels of government and all governmental entities.
Okay. And Mr. Brinkman, do you have a response to that answer?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right. That's on that. We're moving along very well here. We're going to move on now to question number 5. Do you support public mass transportation to alleviate automobile traffic and make people movement more efficient? If so, what do you plan to have the state do? If not, what do you plan to have the state do to improve traffic flow? So question number 5, Mr. Otis, your answer first, please.
Yes, I absolutely do believe in mass public transportation. However, when it comes to things like Cincinnati streetcar, I do not think that we as Hamilton County residents should be on the hook for that. That is something that the city adopted and something that the city should take care of. If it were to affect Anderson and we were to put in a light rail to make it better for commuters, especially in the morning with the high levels of traffic we have on 471, Columbia Parkway, 71, 75, and with all the construction going on right now, that would be something I would definitely be willing to look into, as well as a high-speed rail that would connect Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otis. And Mr. Brinkman, your response to question number 5, please.
Most transportation dollars come from the gas tax. Cars are a vast majority of that. I think it's only fair that what folks are paying for at the pump go into roads, fixing our roads, fixing our bridges. We hear all the time that our infrastructure is not adequate. We have a Western Hills Viaduct that's falling down. We have areas, heck, drive over 8 Mile Road and some of those, and they're really bumpy. We need to be taking care of our roads that exist, fixing our bridges, and putting our funds there. Nothing is worse than taking money that it should be dedicated to roads and bridges and putting them into things that they don't belong. I love bike trails, but that's not where gas tax transportation should be going. The idea of spending money on the Cincinnati streetcar, I certainly think is crazy, and I work to fight that. I don't know and don't think that we should be taking our money and putting it into a light rail system or even a inner-city rail system in the state of Ohio. I don't think that's a wise investment of funds. So I guess I'm saying, hey, let's take the gas tax money, the transportation dollars we have, and put it where folks believe it should go, roads, bridges, fix the Brent Spence Bridge, that type of thing, and that's where it should stay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brinkman. And Mr. Otis, do you have a response to that answer?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, very good. We finished with the league submitted questions. In the library, there was a box that was available for anybody to submit questions for the candidate forum tonight. So we have some questions that came from the box in the library, and we will just read them as they were written and move into this part of the forum. Okay, so we have question number 6. A number of the serious issues confronting our state and district will require conversations among legislators and constituents so that we may learn from each other to find solutions that all are willing to support. What methods would you use to facilitate a wide range of input, education, and discussion on the issues? So question number 6, Mr. Brinkman, you're the first to answer that, please.
Well, thank you. On a local level, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think it's important for a legislator to go out, not only reach out to the citizens, but also to those constituent areas like your township government, your park districts, your school districts, and hear from them and see what we can do different to make them more efficient and effective in what they're trying to do. That's the first place it starts. I came home from Columbus every night for 8 years, never spent a night in Columbus. I wanted to be home with my family and my constituent groups. I came to the Anderson trustee meetings, I would say 11 out of 12 times every year. We'd go to Fairfax and Newtown and all the places to hear what they had to say and really bring up and get solutions for their problems. As far as when you're in Columbus, you have to be reaching out too. If anybody watched the last campaign I was in, I was accused of working with Democrats. You know, in a bipartisan mood, is that such a bad thing? And many of those things were procedural votes, quite frankly, whereas unfair characterization. But I did feel that when it came to issues down here, we have a delegation that goes from Hamilton County. There's Democrats in that. There's Republicans in that. We have to speak with one voice when it comes to Hamilton County issues and the city of Cincinnati issues. Interestingly, should I win, I would be the only Republican who lives in one of the great 8 cities in the state of Ohio. So again, I'll be hearing some different voices to represent them up there. And
Thank
so
you, Mr. Brinkman. I think we time. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
So anyway, to sum up, I think you have to work, not only have your ear to the ground, listen to your local folks, but you also have to work with others to make some things happen. And that's the only way we're going to affect the challenges that are ahead of us.
Okay. Thank you. Pardon me for that inadvertent interruption. I apologize. Mr. Otis, you have up to 3 minutes to answer the question. Excuse me, 2 minutes, I'm sorry.
When I'm elected, I would love to have a weekly forum or a weekly town hall meeting in the district to make sure that all voters would have an input, especially on anything that I would be signing my name to or voting for. Again, I am not elected to represent my own ideology. I am elected to represent you as your voice. So it is whatever ultimately you want is what I would vote for, even if it were to go against something that I would to personally believe, because I am not elected to represent myself or my ideologies. I'm elected to represent you.
Thank you. Mr. Brinkman, any reply to that?
Well, I think Edmund Burke also mentioned that one of the reasons you're elected to represent folks is to use your good judgment. When you go out and you say, here's where I stand, sometimes your good judgment is oversees what the mob wants. So we don't have mob rule in this country. It's not a strict democracy, it's a representative democracy, a republic. And I think that we're entrusted with using our good judgment many times to see through the clutter, and that folks expect that of us.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. And Mr. Otis, any closing comments on that question?
Good judgment, yes, but there's a point where good judgment is lost to ideology again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on then to the question number 7. How do you feel about our border security in relationship to the danger of terrorists and the Ebola outbreak? That was from one of a 12-year-old citizen of Anderson Township. And so for question number 7, and yes, thank you, Sherry. And what would be the best plan of attack for our country to be aggressive and proactive? How would you fix this issue? How can you protect my family from terrorists? Let me read that again. That was kind of a long question. How do you feel about our border security in relationship to the danger of terrorists and the Ebola outbreak? And what would be the best plan of attack for our country to be aggressive and proactive? How would you fix this issue? How can you protect my family from terrorists? That's kind of a powerful question there. Okay, so question number 7, Mr. Otis, you would reply first, please.
Well, after 9/11, I definitely think the United States has stepped up its security measures as far as letting terrorists get into the United States. When it comes to our borders, as it says on the Statue of Liberty, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. It doesn't say, wait a second, let's see what we can do to keep you out of here. And then when it comes to the Ebola scare, it's not really a scare. There's one person in Texas affected with the Ebola virus. And what do when there's a scare? We threaten to take away the health insurance that we just gave American citizens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otis. And Mr. Brinkman?
Well, while the question seems to have been thought out, well, it's really not appropriate for state representation. It's mostly a federal issue. They deal with our borders and with some of these foreign policy issues. I don't believe our borders are that secure. I think the recent mobbing of our borders with these youth from down in Latin America has shown how porous they really are. I think we need to be better with that. I think that we need to have English only in our country. I think it's important that folks learn English, speak English. It's better for us, and it's better for them to get into the American dream and be productive employees, but productive citizens. And I don't think it's a bad thing to ask them to do that. As far as Ebola, I was first in the General Assembly, and the thing that was going to kill us all was West Nile virus. We responded with some funds that were concerned about that, and as you know, we did have some citizens who passed because of it, but we were by and large able to have facilities where we took care of that threat. This is a little bit different, it's a little stronger. The CDC itself has already said they believe 1.2 million people will die in those two countries in Africa by January. And with the way foreign travel is, some of those folks could come to America. The tough answer to really stop them is basically 28 days quarantine to really make sure that they're not going to be a threat. And I think we have to be prepared. It's our job. People look to us for leadership to make those hard decisions and, yes, do some of the quarantining and things that are necessary to keep our citizens safe.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, any further response to that question?
No, thank you.
No, okay, all right. Then moving on to question number 8 that we got from the library box. To both candidates, are you aware of human trafficking in Ohio and Cincinnati? Is anything being done about human trafficking? Question number 8. So, Mr. Brinkman, your answer first, please.
Well, I'm not aware of a specific example of human trafficking. However, I'm aware that it does occur. When I was in the General Assembly in '08, we did pass a bill that was a good first step to stop it. I think we can do more because I do believe it does exist out there. I have heard that the General Assembly in the last few years has looked at it again to try to get Ohio ahead of the curve of this problem. And it's something that, quite frankly, it's just not American. It's not to traffic in human beings, and it's against freedom and liberty, and we need to stand up, all folks. It's not party ideology, partisan. It's something we need to stand up and be against and really work hard to restrict and stop.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, your response to the question, please.
I agree with Tom on the fact that it isn't a party issue. It is an issue of all Ohio citizens. I mean, human trafficking, and it has hit home. It has. Look at Cleveland with the 3 young women that were locked in a basement for how long? The Super Bowl is one of the largest things in the United States that we have, which is also one of the largest rings for human trafficking to happen. This is an issue that definitely needs to be worked on, and more strict regulations need to be set so that we are able to deal with this and combat with this as it hits us. I work for a nonprofit called Teen Response, where I work with cognitively challenged adults, and our former CEO, John Kiefer, now works with Lighthouse Youth Services. And he has actually went to the Attorney General, Mike DeWine, with a lot of the homeless youth that they deal with through Lighthouse Youth Services because of the trafficking problem with our homeless youth. I think if we can work toward making sure that our youth are in homes and taken care of, it will cut down on some of the human trafficking happening here at home.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otis. And Mr. Brinkman, any response to that? No, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have question number 9 now. Traffic at River Downs Riverbend is very poorly planned after a concert or function. Are you aware of this, and what would you suggest to try to address it? Question number 9, Mr. Otis, your response first, please.
Yes, I am very well of the traffic. I actually sat for about 2.5 hours in a parking lot down there trying to get out of a Riverbend concert this summer. However, right now, with the construction that is going on Kellogg, it is something that we deal with, but I would like to work with local municipalities and putting maybe a through lane for people that aren't coming out of Riverbend or coming out of the Belterra Park. That way we could alleviate some of the traffic, but I don't think the answer is putting another stop sign or another street light on Kellogg Avenue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otis. And Mr. Brinkman, your reply to the question?
Well, during my 8 years in the General Assembly, I came to the Township Trustees meeting, and I saw that they spent a lot of time and a lot of money to make sure those roads were wide, plenty of lanes, deal with those increase of traffic that does come down because of the concerts, anticipating racinos, which we finally have. They always turn to me to make sure that if a racino occurred, that there'd be some funds there, because they're not necessarily 24-hour operations, but they last a long time. You need to have police and emergency folks there to deal with that. I think they've done a pretty good job, considering that those are 2 or 3 times a week, those instances happening. And again, working with the local officials to see what more is necessary. You got a heck of a neat thing going on down there. Thanks to the trustees, thanks to the foresight of your elected officials in Anderson Township. You know, you got Coney Island, you got Riverbend, you got the Racino, they're working on a boat dock down there, you then have the dog park, you have something going on with the old AJs. And that's going to be a really neat area, and I think that they've done a pretty good job at anticipating that, and I would look forward to working with them even more to take care of any problems they would continue to have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brinkman. And any other reply to that, Mr. Otis?
No, thank you.
Okay, no further comments, okay. All right, we'll move on to the last question from the library, which is question number 10 for the evening so far. In your view, should taxpayers be funding failing charter schools? If elected, how will you address the charter schools' lack of transparency and accountability and the state's lack of oversight over them? And Mr. Brinkman, you're first to answer question number 10.
Well, I'd like to turn that around a little. Should the state be financing any failing schools? I mean, there's a heck of a lot of failing public schools that are financed. Certainly, we could do a little bit more to watch charter schools and make sure that they provide what they are all hyped up to do. I spoke with someone in the audience earlier to look at something going on in Bond Hill, and I certainly will read up on that. But we also, the majority of kids educated in the state of Ohio are done through our public schools, and I don't know if those are being held as accountable as they should be. We should look at all failing schools, both public, private, and charter, and really hold them to a higher standard than they're currently being held.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis?
Charter schools absolutely need to be held accountable for the tax dollars that they are receiving from this state. Right now, all we are simply doing is selling our children's future to the highest bidder and the highest donors to a political campaign, with people that own White Hat and the people who own ECOT. It is, oh man, I apologize, I get very heated about this issue. Charter schools are something I would like to be seen held extremely accountable for the tax dollars they receive. If a public school is held accountable for their tax dollars, why would a charter school not be held to the same standards as a public school?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otis. Mr. Brinkman, any reply to that?
Well, many of you have mentioned that I've lost a little weight, and I work out over in Woodland Mound with several people, and one of them is a lady who lives down off of Salem, whose children go to Sherwood Elementary, but she actually works for a charter school online, teaching kids who have been told to get out of school, maybe have some disciplinary problems, and helping them learn to read or write. She's competent. She does a great job. She turns a lot of these kids around. That's important. We got to remember that. There's a lot of different alternatives we need out there.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. And Mr. Otis, any final comments on that question? 30
I think
seconds.
it comes to accountability with the parents and when their children come home. I know when I was a kid growing up, my mother would spend at least 3 hours a day with me teaching my spelling words, making sure I was able to read a book, the words that were in the book. So accountability with the parents when the child comes home from school.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Mr. Otis. At this point, we open up to questions from the audience. Yeah. Do we have any audience members who would like to submit questions or ask questions of the candidates? Hmm? Oh, okay. With the podium over here. So the mic is on. Anybody have questions ready for the candidates? Anything come to mind as we're talking tonight? Okay, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Ruth. A fellow league member, I thought she was going to assist the answering. Thank you, Ruth. Go ahead.
Many legislators believe that matters of environmental review and regulation are best handled by the states. However, recent bills in the Ohio legislature have been based on model legislation provided by the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. ALEC is a a national organization that is funded by multinational corporations and foundations whose primary purpose is to influence legislation at the state level. What is your position on ALEC? Will you join ALEC? And please address ALEC's role in the rollback of Ohio's renewable portfolio standards.
Thank you, Ruth. And so, in keeping with alternating how we answer the questions, it will be Mr. Otis who answers first this time.
No, I will not join ALEC. Again, this is a thing where I believe that our government needs to be more transparent. Legislators are not something that should be bought like a commodity at a store. We are there to represent the people that elect us and there to represent the better interest of our state. So no, I would not join ALEC.
Okay. And Mr. Brinkman, you reply?
I believe there's 7 different legislative associations, groups, National Council of State Legislators, Council of State Governments, which is based out of Lexington, several others. ALEC is one of them. I was a member of ALEC while I was in the General Assembly for 6 of my 8 years. I look forward to rejoining ALEC when I get back to the General Assembly, should the voters select me in November. I think they're a wonderful organization. They really help us meet with other legislators and find out what the heck is going on. And we learn a lot from that. Not one penny of taxpayer dollars go to support ALEC, unlike the other 6 organizations which do require a stipend from the state government to join. ALEC is free from taxpayer dollars being spent on it. I voted for the renewable standards portfolio in, I think it's 2007 or 2008. Recently it was rolled back. I don't believe, well, it was rolled back temporarily for 2 years. I don't necessarily support that because I thought it was a heck of a good idea when we voted on it. So I didn't know that that was necessarily something ALEC did because I haven't been a member of the organization the last 5 or 6 years. But I think most legislators can think for themselves and they don't necessarily just fall in line because that's a group they're a part of. There's a lot of associations that do model legislation. I sell life insurance now, and I know that our group, NAFI, works to get model state legislation mostly for conformity, so life insurance policies work across state lines, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. In many cases, it's a good thing. So I'd hate to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say they're all bad, but I will certainly join ALEC and look forward to working with them.
Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Okay, any further comments? No?
Just that I would support bipartisan legislation to repeal the rollback.
Okay, Mr. Brinkman, no? Okay. All right, next audience question.
Yes, I came in a few minutes late, so I apologize if this was addressed earlier. I just wanted to know what each candidate's thoughts were on the Forest Hills School District bond issue.
Okay, Mr. Brinkman, you would be the first one to answer that question, please.
Thank you. When I first ran in 2000, I made a pledge that I would not get involved in any issue or support any candidate that I could not personally vote on. I don't think that's right. I live in the city of Cincinnati, and it always was infuriating to me that John Pepper of P&G, who lived in Wyoming, was always coming down and telling us to vote for more tax dollars in Cincinnati, and he didn't even live there. So I've kept that pledge pretty well. So I do not live in the Forest Hills School District, so I won't tell you how to vote on that issue. I don't live there, and I won't tell you who to vote for trustee.
That wasn't my question. I asked whether you would support it or not.
Because I don't live there, I haven't read the issue, because I can't vote on it. I do know that Cincinnati has an issue on the ballot, and I'm certainly going to vote against that one.
As a resident of the Forest Hills School District, yes, I do support issue 4, which is on the ballot. Forest Hills is the reason my family moved to this district. They wanted me to be subject to the best public schools that they were within their means to live in. So yes, I would support Forest Hills in every way that I could, and I support issue 4.
Thank you, Mr. Otis. Mr. Brinkman, any response? Any rebuttal? Okay. All right, our next question from the audience, please.
I have a couple of questions, but I want to give a little bit of history. I have a degree in elementary elementary education. I was living in Virginia at the time. Virginia was the first to have this Common Core. And the thing I found, I had grandchildren there, was that all of a sudden, the teachers were just teaching to pass tests. Forget creativity, reasonable thinking, music, art, whatever. And so the thing I didn't care for especially was the fact that if students didn't hit a benchmark, in Virginia, they gave them 3 years to hit the benchmark of what they felt where the school should be. Well, but if you didn't hit the benchmark, they were going to take money away from you. And I personally think they should give you more money to hire teachers or tutors or...
Yeah. Can you get to your question, please? Yeah.
Then Bush put it in for the whole country. And so I would like this a little clarified because I lived in different states. What do you mean by the Common Core? Is this the same thing that Bush put in? And this, you know, taking money away from the district. Also, I want to say real quick, the first year, only 3% of the schools passed the benchmark. And that was around Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay, so around, you want to restate your question, you want to know...
The main concern I have, explain, is this the same, what you're talking about, the core curriculum and hitting these benchmarks and passing these tests, and also taking away money if you don't hit the benchmark?
Oh, okay. Okay, on this question, Mr. Otis, you are up for the first answer.
Okay, so to answer the first part of the question, the new Common Core is the remnants of No Child Left Behind, which is what you're speaking of. So right now, I don't believe that there is over-testing going on, but with testing, even as a child in school myself when I was there, I had testing. I had proficiency testing, I had the Otis Lennon test, I had to be able to learn by a certain grade, and all the Common Core is a much more rigorous set of standards for teachers to implement into the schools, to my understanding.
But you don't know about financial side?
With the cutbacks when it comes to Common Core, I do not believe that there will be cutbacks when it comes if the schools do not test at proper levels.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Brinkman, your answer to the question, please.
Well, recently there was an article in the Enquirer about a teacher who's tracked students up in Lebanon, and they took over 100 high-stakes tests in their 4 years in school there, 29 in 1 year. And I think the kids are being tested to death. Someone uses the example as if I check my height every week, it doesn't mean I'm going to grow any taller. How many do they really need? I would like to get back to an off-the-shelf test like Iowa, California Achievement, something like that, once a year, once every 2 years like we did as a kids. I think that's a lot better. It doesn't, these kids are being taught for the test, they're not being taught to learn. One of my favorite things was back in 7th grade, a teacher came in and said, we're going to learn about propaganda. And if you, 56, I was back in the Vietnam War era. And I never heard what propaganda was, but when you learned about it, it was something she could do it. She didn't have to worry about a test that was coming down 1 week and whether it was teaching to the test, and we learned things. And I think we really have taken away the tools where our best teachers that we've trained them have an opportunity to teach and enlighten children. So that's another reason why I'm against the Common Core and all these tests. I think we got to get back to basic education, trust the teachers to do their jobs, and as far as taking funds away, I'm not sure whether that happens. I think what they're trying to do is tie the tests to their salary so that the teachers are wrapped into that. Again, are they going to go out on a limb? We have a situation up in Columbus where they told kids to stay home because they didn't want them to take the test 1 week because it might hurt their scores. A big test-taking scandal down in Atlanta. So I don't like any of it. I think we need to go back to the way we had it and raise the standards, but let the teachers teach.
We should let Mr. Otis answer, and then, okay, and then you can ask another question. Is that okay, Sherry, to ask you? Okay, yeah.
Sorry, Mr.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's fine. When it comes to over-testing, Tom was speaking about how they were over-testing in Lebanon. The Common Core was just implemented in the state of Ohio this year. So that would have been an old standard that Ohio was on with the over-testing happening. That's all I have.
Okay, okay.
The charter schools, I feel that our children are guaranteed an education, and that comes from property taxes, local taxes, whatever. And charter schools are somebody that pays more, or private schools with a select clientele. You know, I personally don't think private schools should get tax money, because we have a public system. If you want it free, you know, use it. And people who want to choose a private school or a charter school, then let them pay more.
So is your question how the candidates, their position on funding for charter schools, taking money from the public schools? Okay, so on this question, Mr. Otis, you would be the first to answer.
I think accountability needs to happen when it comes to our charter schools. If a charter school is a good school and it isn't failing, then absolutely, the charter school should stay open, but it should be held to the same standards as a public school. So,
But private schools also have a select clientele. And if somebody doesn't do well or behavior
Yeah,
problems.
okay. Yeah. Mr. Brinkman, you,
The public schools
okay.
have to pay
Let-
everybody.
Let's let Mr. Brinkman respond to the question about funding for charter schools and taking money from public schools.
Well, I think there's a public interest in teaching basics to all children. And therefore, are funds that do follow the child, whether they go to charter, private schools, parochial schools, and I think that's a good thing. On a very pragmatic reason, you'll never pass another levy if you don't do it. If Forest Hills did not provide transportation to parochial schools, if the state did not provide textbooks in, again, reading, writing, arithmetic, it just wouldn't happen. Those folks would be no votes, and you just wouldn't pass them. But I think all children deserve that amount of support. Also, keep in mind, like I mentioned, the lady who lives down on Salem who's teaching an E environment, some of these kids are kicked out of school. There are behavioral problems. There's reasons why the public school doesn't want them there. And, but they still deserve an education too. And so this is an example of a charter school online that can have them learn. She has challenges with them. Again, they can always not show up online. But she says she's been having some pretty good results with some of these kids. And I think that's good for the public schools also, because again, if you have a disruptive child, maybe they need to be at home learning online. Maybe they have to go to a charter school where they can handle their situation better. So I wouldn't want to close the door on those alternatives, because they do actually help out in some cases with what's going on in public schools.
Yeah, thank you. We should allow another question to be asked, and you can have another opportunity. Okay, thank you. Okay.
I would like to know, in the face of an increasingly aging population in both Ohio and the United States as a whole, and in the face of the fact that people with disabilities are living longer, and the fact that people, as they age, develop more disabilities. And one more caveat is that we have an increasingly wide disparity between the rich and the poor. How will you address ensuring enough affordable and accessible housing and transportation for this population?
Okay, thank you for that question. And Mr. Brinkman, you answer first on this one.
Well, when I got out of the legislature, I started selling life insurance. And I also sell long-term care insurance. And I would encourage everyone in this room to get some long-term care insurance, because we are living longer and we do need that support. That's one thing we need to do. We need to encourage personal responsibility when it comes to folks down the road. We also need to encourage people to save more and look at their future income when they retire. Because again, I deal with folks who are in very tough situations, because For whatever reason, they didn't save, they didn't plan for the future. Folks are living longer and longer. We do need to do more with housing for these populations that you mentioned. We have a little bit of a situation in our district, not nearly what they have on the west side, where there's the abuse of Section 8 housing and subsidized housing that's really just destroyed Westwood, and Priceville's on its way. We need to be more cognizant of where these dollars go, and I would encourage them to go to folks, again, with disabilities, elderly population, behind Remke at High Park Plaza, those two big towers there. Those are basically senior housing, subsidized, and these work out great. And I think we need to look at putting our dollars there instead of some of the dubious Section 8 situations that we have around the county.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, your response?
This is another area where I do agree with our current governor and with the Ohio Department of Health, with the expansion of Medicare that just happened in Ohio, to help take care of our seniors and the disabled and our aging community that we have here in Ohio. I was thinking, when you were asking the question, actually, about something that my mother had told me that she had read when she was reading a Cincinnati Enquirer article that was from a woman who was in her 90s who grew up in Beijing, China, how in China they actually take care of their elders because they believe that their minds hold all the secrets from what the past was. So, I mean, taking care of our elderly with the expansion of Medicare, again, that's something I agree with Governor Kasich and I agree with the Ohio Department of Health on. When it comes to affordable housing, I believe in fair market value homes. So in Mount Washington, you can't buy a house, renovate a house, and then charge an exorbitant amount of rent to rent a home. So fair market value would be a good way to take care of affordable housing in the area, and also involve some private and public sector in that. So.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience.
Yes. Originally, one of the first questions up here indicated that the state of Ohio should have $800 million to $1 million or $1 billion worth of excess funds. Both of you jumped on the fact that they called it rainy day fund. Both of you jumped on the fact you couldn't get to the answer quick enough on how you were going to spend it. Why do they call it a rainy day fund? And why don't I hear more politicians come up and say, we're going to save this, we're going to cut the debt, we're going to do something of that order? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. For this question, Mr. Otis, you're the first to answer.
Okay, when I answered the question at first, I never talked about tapping into the rainy day fund. I do think that Ohio needs to sit on most of its rainy day fund in case we do face some sort of financial catastrophe like we did with the markets collapse with the homing and financial markets. With the $800 million projected surplus that the state will have, that's what I was talking about investing. With the state, we're required by state constitutional law to do two things as a legislature. Make sure our public education system is both thorough and efficient and well-funded. Also, make sure that we balance our budget. So every state legislature in the state of Ohio actually is constitutionally mandated to balance our budget so our state doesn't hit an exorbitant amount of debt.
If that's the case, why do we have excess funds? Because we weren't running a balance before that.
The access funds have come on the backs of local working families and local governments with the cuts to our local government funds.
Okay. Mr. Brinkman, your response?
Well, I think my response was, before we have designs on where we're going to spend the money, we have to wait for the effects of the governor's expansion of Obamacare in the state of Ohio. We really don't know how much that's going to cost. So before we go spend it anywhere, and even give it back to the citizens, we need to see where that goes. As far as if we find out that that's moderate, I think one of the things we should look is at the local government fund, because again, and I do agree with my opponent, the budget was balanced on the back of local governments, and they've received over a 50% cut on the funds they get, and many of them, not necessarily out here in Forest Hills, Anderson Township, but many of them are having to resort to a lot of special levies to fund basic services. You know, I guess in my younger days, I thought, well, the government should operate even and just give all the money back. But, you know, it's a big operation, and you can't just be like a yo-yo like that, and, hey, we got $2 million left, let's give it back, or, hey, we got $200 million extra, let's spend it. You really have to take a look at what you might have coming down the pike. I might remind everyone of another item. We have been borrowing money to pay unemployment all during this recession. We owe that money. The state of Ohio owes that money back to the federal government. Now, I know the federal government wastes money all the time, don't get me wrong, but technically we do owe that money back, and that reaches almost $1 billion. And we have to start thinking about how we're going to pay that back. So, again, I hope I didn't cloud the issue and disappoint you, but I think we owe it to you as leaders to look ahead at what some of these items might cost down the road before we go out and get rid of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis, any rebuttal to that? Or?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Looks like we have another question from the audience.
Where do you two stand on the issue of same-sex marriage?
Okay, on this question, Mr. Brinkman, you would be first to answer.
I believe marriage should be between a man and a woman. That was in the has been put in the Constitution of the state of Ohio overwhelmingly. I think it's a state issue dealing with marriage. If folks would like to change it, I think they should go out and collect signatures and put it on a ballot and put it up for a vote. But I think it is a state decision, and currently I like the way it is right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brinkman. Mr. Otis?
Yesterday, the United States Supreme Court said that they will not hear same-sex marriage as it comes through the circuit courts. They're leaving the power to the states within the circuit courts, ultimately giving the decision to the circuit court. Right now, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, it has not ruled on this yet. So I think once they rule, that will be the law of the land.
Okay. Okay, any further comment, Mr. Brinkman, anything? No, okay. All right, do we have any other questions from the audience at this time? No? Going once, going twice? Okay. All right, thank you for your participation and the thoughtful questions that you offered. So we'll have our candidates give their closing remarks and their closing statements, and Mr. Otis, you will go first on this one. Yeah.
All right. Again, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and everyone who came out this evening to brave the storm and the weather that was so atrocious today. When you go to the ballot on November the 4th, look at your ballot, look at the answers that he and I give tonight, and make an educated decision on who you want to represent you in Columbus. I will be that candidate that will cross the aisle. I'm not another career politician seeking a seat. I will be the one who will work with Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike in our state legislature to get the well-deserved job Ohioans need done. So when you go to the ballot on November the 4th, I ask for your vote, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Otis. And Mr. Brinkman?
I have a long history in this area. I've lived here for 56 years. I'm married here, raised 6 children in this district's schools, taken them to this district's parks. Many of them are employed in this district, as am I. I worked in the printing industry for 22 years, took a step out of that to engage in public service, and then got into the life insurance industry, where I've been working for the last 6 years. I think that breadth of experience, it gives me the ability to represent you best in the 27th District in the Ohio General Assembly. In addition, I don't believe my 8 years previously in the General Assembly are a handicap in any way. The old expression, I know where the bodies are buried, I know where the restrooms are, I know how things happen. I think I can hit the ground running as soon as I get up there and really work hard to address some of the issues that we have in this state, in this district, our county, and will serve you well. I look forward to returning to Columbus should the voters decide that's what they want, and we'll abide by that outcome. And thank you very much for coming out and listening, and for all those on at home and watching this. Hope we had enough sparks that kept you awake during the whole thing. And thanks to League for putting this on. I think it's a very valuable service that you give to the community by doing that.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for the discussion, and thanks for the candidates. Not everybody does this, actually, so I think we have to thank them for putting themselves out there to serve and to answer your questions. I want to thank Glenda Bernstein for being our moderator, the Anderson Center for the space, the Anderson Township Board of Trustees, ACTV, Vicki Earhart, the Township Administrator, Amy Meyer, the Event Coordinator, and the League of Women Voters of the Cincinnati area. It takes a lot of partnership to pull this off. So thanks very much and have a great night.